Okay, let's talk about the atom. The atom is the basis of everything. You're made of atoms. Everybody else is made of atoms. Everything is made of atoms. And atoms have three basic parts. They have a nucleus on the inside, and inside that nucleus there are protons and neutrons. Neutrons have no charge. The protons have a positive charge. The part that we're most interested in are the electrons. They circle around the outside of the atom, and they are in layers, or we call them shells. There are several shells, and we will discuss those. But the most important part is that electron that's on the outside circling around. And I want to get rid of a vicious rumor now. A lot of people think that when electrons orbit the nucleus of an atom, it's like the planets. It's not. The orbits are almost chaotic. And the thing that we need to remember is that the further away from the nucleus that an electron gets, the easier it is for it to escape and move to another atom. And that's what electricity is. It's the movements of electrons from one atom to another. The shells are ordered. They are K through Q, and there are rules that pertain to them. Each shell is allowed so many electrons, and K is allowed 2, L is allowed 8, the next one is 18, 32, 32, 18, and 8, respectively, K through Q. And the outside shell, the outermost shell, is called the valence shell. And the valence shell is where the electrons get the most distance away from the nucleus. And the further it is away from the nucleus, the easier it is to move. So when we move electrons, it's always going to be the electrons in the valence shell. Valence shell and why it's so important. The reason it's important is because it determines whether the atom is an insulator, a conductor, or a semiconductor. Conductors allow the flow of electrons easily. Insulators impede the flow of electrons. And semiconductors are the basis of all of our electronics, like our PCs, our phones, our cameras. All of those are based on the semiconductor. So let's first talk about the conductor. Good conductors are copper, gold, silver, and usually metals. Other things are conductors, but it's normally metals. They're the best. The reason is because they only have one electron in that valence shell that we've talked about. That one electron in the valence shell allows that electron to break away quite easily. Insulators, usually you're talking about rubber, glass, plastic, ceramic, and those have 8 electrons in the valence shell. Now, most atoms are just really content when they have 8 electrons in their valence shell. They do not want to let them go. Therefore, it impedes the flow of electricity. That being said, if enough voltage, which we will talk about later, is applied to a conductor that has an insulator on the outside, it will break free. If it can find a ground, it will burn its way through. We'll talk about why that happens later, but just know that if enough voltage is applied, it can break through even the best of insulators. Now we're going to talk about semiconductors. Semiconductors have 4 electrons in the valence shell, and they're kind of in between. They're just not content. So that's why we make the chips, semiconductor chips out of those. So just remember, conductors have 3 or less conductors in the valence shell. Semiconductors have 4 electrons in the valence shell. And insulators have 5 or more electrons in the valence shell. And that's all we really need to understand about that. When working with electricity, it's important to remember safety. So I'm going to try to give you a safety tip on every episode. And the first tip that I could give you is, this may be a little rude, but don't ever trust anybody. If somebody says the power is off, check it yourself, because you never know, they may have made a mistake. I'm sure nobody would do that on purpose, so always check to make sure yourself. That's very important. Okay, now the next episode that we're about a little bit about Ohm's law, we'll introduce you to that, and we will also talk about voltage, current, resistance, and power. Those are the 4 things that you must memorize. If you don't memorize anything else, you must memorize the things about those 4 things. So in summation, the atom, it has a nucleus, and in the nucleus there are protons and neutrons. The protons are positively charged, the neutrons are neutral in charge. And around that, in a orbit of sorts, there are electrons. And the electrons move from one atom to another, and that is how we produce electricity. And in a nutshell, that's it. But you've also got to remember that the valence shell number of electrons determines whether that particular material or that atom is a conductor, an insulator, or a semiconductor. We will see you next time. We'll have the next episode soon. Have a good day.